Hello and welcome. This is Wilrens for Create a Learning Site, the place to go deeper in your study of the Bible. How to study and teach a big book? Well, here's the bottom line right at the start. To successfully study a big book, you have to make it a priority and allocate time to it, or it is not going to happen. But don't worry, this is not a you ought to do this, do that, do more kind of a pep talk. Instead, I would rather whet your appetite. Imagine that over the course of this coming year, you manage to do some in-depth study of one larger book in the Bible, getting a good grip on it, and perhaps even preparing a series of lectures on it. What would you gain? How would that make you feel? What would it do for your walk with God next year? What counts as large or big depends on what you have been in the habit of doing. If this is a new thing for you, it might be a longer epistle, say Romans, or 1 Corinthians, or perhaps Hebrews. If you'd like to chew off a bit more, it could be one of the Gospels, or the book of Acts. And if you have experience doing this sort of thing, especially if you are involved in teaching a Bible course, maybe you should go for one of the really big ones. One of the giants in the Old Testament, and there are quite a few to choose from. If you have a full-time involvement with a Bible course like the SBS, you may not have a choice. It is part of your job. This is how it was for me during my first year in SBS. We were a team of 4 people, and each book of the Bible had to be taught. We had a few guest speakers come in, but not so many, so there were quite a few books for each of us left to cover. I don't remember very well what I taught in the New Testament, but I do remember that in the Old Testament I took on Genesis and Isaiah, among others. To put it mildly, that was a bit much. I remember sitting in a hotel room late at night on my way back from the Netherlands, where I had attended the wedding of my sister, squeezing in another reading of Genesis. I think all in all I managed to do about 10 readings, which is not all that much if you're going to teach a book. When I came to teaching Isaiah, I was still struggling to figure out how do I read and understand Isaiah's lyric visions of the distant future. As a result, I had little time and energy left to prepare the actual presentation. Both lecture weeks were okay, but they were not great. It was a start, however, and I returned to these 2 books later. For my dissertation, I chose Isaiah to work with. The topic was how to interpret eschatological prophecy, that is, end times prophecy in the Old Testament, and I mostly worked with passages from the book of Isaiah to come up with answers. My supervisor, Ron Smith, insisted I had to read Isaiah 50 times. Sounds like a lot, but if you have 6 months to do it, it means 2 afternoons of reading per week. By the time I was done, I had a far better understanding of the book and a far better foundation for teaching it. It's the book that I've taught more than any other. Genesis I picked up some years later, and I realized we needed to give our students better input on the early chapters of Genesis. In this case, it's not so much that the text is difficult, because for the most part it's a wonderfully simple story. The challenge is the questions it raises. Coming up with an overview of possible answers required working through a lot of secondary material dealing with science and evolution, ancient worldviews, and the question of genre or type of literature. My story with the book of Revelation is different yet again. For many years I did not want to teach it. I preferred to let guest speakers do this. For one, I didn't want to teach Revelation unless I had had ample time to dive into it and get to the point of feeling I understood it well enough to do a good job teaching it. There was no opportunity for this until the autumn of 98 or 2000. Around that time, all our candidates for teaching the book in the upcoming core course were not available, and I had several months with few responsibilities. In other words, time. It was great. I loved studying the book and reading about it, including 2 commentaries on Revelation, and I've been teaching Revelation ever since. Maybe you are not a teacher, but even if you are not going to teach anything, it may still be a powerful and growth-inducing exercise to take a larger book and give it more than your average reading time. If you could take the time, what is a book that you would like to know better? What is a book that intrigues you, that you are curious about, that holds a special interest for you? Give it a thought, select a candidate, and continue listening with this book in mind. Now, the last month of the year, is an excellent time to get started. Between Christmas and New Year's Eve, you may have a bit more time than usual. Then comes the beginning of a new calendar year. Regardless of whether you start right after Christmas, or on January 1st, or on some other day, here's what's important in order to succeed. Be clear on your aim and be clear on your timing. Let's start with timing. What is your window of time to work on this? For me, with Revelation, it was a time period of 3 or 4 months in which I had a lot of time I could allocate to it. For Isaiah, I had even more time, 6 months. Outside of a university or seminary setting, this will of course look very different. But what is a good time spent to be working on this, and how much time per week or month can you put into it? This will also help you to test whether the aim you set for yourself is realistic. So be clear on your aim. You may well want to define it yourself, but it will probably include reading the book with understanding, seeing implications for your life, meeting God in the process, and being made alive by His Word. You may also have a few specific questions you want to incorporate into your objectives. If you study in order to prepare teaching, your aim may be to have a clear outline and lecture plan, so you will be able to help others come to the point of reading the book with understanding. At this point, you're only 1 or 2 steps away from a SMART goal. For one, put it in writing. So you have a record for yourself. Written goals have a far higher likelihood of being accomplished than non-written goals. SMART, by the way, is an acronym summarizing 5 criteria for good goal setting. A good goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-orientated. That is, your goal needs a deadline and a time frame. At this point, you may still need to make your goal, your aim, more specific. Try to list specific steps that you will include in your process of study. For instance, read through the book X times, spend an hour or two studying a particular passage, read a particular introduction to the book or a commentary, etc. Further down in this presentation, there will be a few more ideas of what you could do. To check if your goal is realistic or attainable, add up the number of hours you estimate that it will take for each step. Does this look doable? When it comes to how to go about studying your book, obviously much depends on your circumstances, your experience, and on how much time you can reasonably expect to invest into this. It also depends on the book you have chosen. For each book, we have to figure out what the crucial questions are, and at least some of these are likely to be unique for that book. A few examples to give the idea. 1 John has written evidence that simplicity can be misleading. In spite of the very simple language used in this book, I don't find it easy to understand. The way John talks in circles confuses me. If this were my study project, I would trace themes and see if I could reorganize the ideas in the book in the way, perhaps a mind map, that I find easier to grasp. Ezekiel is quite different from 1 John. This book is well structured in large units. It is also highly repetitive in content, and certainly not in form of communication. A crucial question, therefore, is why does it need this near monotonous repetition? And how does the form of communication differ from unit to unit? Jeremiah, in contrast, is at first sight a confusing chronological mess. In order to make sense of it, I would have to piece together for each passage for which this is possible, where it fits on the timeline of Jeremiah's life. Isaiah speaks of things that are near in time as well as of the distant future. Much of the latter deals with the age to come and the kingdom or rule of Yahweh. It's not always easy, to put it mildly, to tell them apart, especially since these two aspects can be mixed in one and the same passage or even verse. Crucial question therefore is, what deals with the near or historical, say Assyria, Babylonia, exile, and what deals with the eschatological, with God's ultimate purpose, the far more distant future? Where is it mixed, or both? How are we to understand the rich imagery that Isaiah uses to speak of this distant reality of a renewed creation? For the historical books, the key question is, what is their purpose or message? When studying one of the books of the law, the challenge is how to read the commandments and how to give them application for today. Since so much depends on the book and on you, it's impossible to present a detailed study guide that fits all. This is why it is so important to spend a bit of time planning, and why I emphasize getting your aim and your time frame clear before you start. I also encourage you to evaluate from time to time how it is going, and if necessary to adjust your aims and your plans on the way. It may turn out you need longer. It may be that you need to cut certain things out in order to get done, and that's fine. Beyond these general guidelines, here are a few more specific ones. It's already been stated, but it bears repeating. Choose a book that is intriguing to you, one that you are curious about. Read the book many times. And define many for yourself. This alone will be a tremendous gain, regardless of what else you do. Do a lot of color coding or marking of the text. For starters, repetitions, personal names, geographical names, picture words, that's metaphors and other figures of speech. Those are always good to mark. Now, if you print out the text of your book, make sure you leave a broad margin and make notes. I frequently use this format for my lecture notes when teaching verse by verse or paragraph by paragraph. Well, then start a list with questions and problems that occur to you, things you'd like to know or would like to dig into, passages you would like to know more about, background information you wonder about, etc. Make sure you keep this list up to date. You may not be able to do everything on your list, but at least you will know what to choose from. Then read a commentary or a selection of articles, secondary literature. It's not the place to start, but it is valuable once you've done some of your own study on the text. It depends a lot on your interests and on the amount of time you have available. You will have to be selective. There's always more that one could read, and so choose wisely what you read. It better be worth the time. And then select some passages that you want to look at in more detail. Now, lecture preparation is not my focus here, but I do want to say a few things about preparing a lecture. It has to do with selecting great, engaging, and relevant content. This is what I would go for. What has caught your interest? What have you found exciting in the book? What has been a great new discovery for you? What is helpful to get a grasp on the book? What does one need to know to make sense of it? And what are the obvious questions that your audience will have about the book? Here is one more thought. The lecture plan is not so much something we create, it is something we discover. It is already there. In the book, in your audience, their setting, their composition, their needs, and in God's mind. Bring the three together, what you find in the book, what you know about your audience, and what the Spirit is whispering, and the shape and pattern of your lecture will emerge. It will need fine-tuning, of course, but its rough form is right there, implied in the text you are studying. Implied being the key word here. After all, it is this text that you want your audience to understand in the end. And this is why it is so important to spend a significant proportion of your time studying the book itself. What to do if you have little time to prepare? I'm going to finish with 2 thoughts for this all too frequent predicament. And you're running out of preparation time before you even get started. Well, in this case, it is vital to be quick to come up with a first draft or rough outline of your lecture, because it will help you to focus on information and material that you really need. Now, you may be able to take a shortcut by using other people's notes or PowerPoint. But be careful. It has not worked well for me to take from somebody else's notes or PowerPoint. I will mine them for ideas, especially to keep me from overlooking an important topic, but I have to make them mine to make it work. Perhaps I can only be confident and passionate in giving away what is or has become truly mine, the way Ezekiel and John had to eat a book before they could continue prophesying. One more thing. If you go to the website at wilrens.org and you find this post dated December 2014, you will find there at the end of that post a simple template for planning such a big book study project. You may find that helpful if you're going to do your own study project. And over there on the website you can also leave a comment. Maybe you have a story to tell about studying a big book. Maybe you have a tip for someone who has to prepare a lecture on one of these giants. And if you enjoyed watching this, please leave a like. That's it. Thank you for watching this.